Thank you very much, Kaitek. So it's time to switch into English for this. Before I introduce our wonderful speakers properly, I would like to say big thanks to everyone who's involved in organization of this conference for all this beautiful time spent together. So clap your hands once again for those who made this possible. Thank you very much. As Kaitek mentioned, my name is Wojtek Kutyla, and I'm a very boring individual who's going to facilitate this panel. So for once, I'm going to be silent, which is something you all will enjoy, I'm sure. Let me just start with a little intro. This is to do with UX and sustainability, and I would like to begin with a quote before the introductions. It's from Rachel Romano and John Friedman, who in the recent article for UX magazine have written. When we think about combating climate change, recycling or biking to work comes to mind, but not the UX we design every day. But if the internet were considered a country, it would be the 7th most polluting country on Earth. The carbon footprint of our gadgets, the internet, and the systems supporting them are on par with greenhouse emissions from the airline industry and are predicted to double by 2025. Every design has physical implications, from the energy it takes to power and experience, to the real-world choices users make based on the information we present and the stories we tell. So, welcome to the panel in which we will hopefully explore all these topics and beyond. And so today we have with us, going from the other side, Peter Kmita, who is a designer with almost 15 years of experience in UX. He is a manager working at Ramp, a Polish scale-up, which makes Web3 solutions that will empower everybody to participate in open networks. Big hands to Peter, please. And then next from Peter, we have Agnieszka Zygmunt, Aga Zygmunt, who is a seasoned UX researcher and service designer with an industrial design background. Aga works at 10 Clouds, where she leads the UX research team. In recent years, she carried out research activities in a full cross-section of industries. Her specialization is research with a focus on discovery phase. So please welcome Agnieszka Zygmunt. And then here is Sebastian Gier, who is our foreign guest from Germany. Sebastian is the co-founder of Footprint, a climate tech startup that helps businesses to reduce their emissions. He's also the host of Design Drives, a podcast and conference on the positive impact of design, as well as a founder of Fast Forward, an UX UI agency helping to accelerate startups and new business ventures, especially in Web3. Good to have you here, Sebastian. Big hands up, please. And then last but not least, obviously, here is Tamara Binczak, a service designer specializing in ESG and digitalization projects. Growth hacker with a proven track record in scaling a variety of businesses, including fintech, SaaS, e-commerce, green energy, and education. Big hands to Tamara. Like I mentioned, my name is Wojtek, and I think it's time to begin. So I have a first thing for us to discuss, and I'll start with a quote from Paul Virilio, who coined the term of dromology. He said, "Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation." And we all know we're moving fast in digital, but I wonder who should be responsible for our design choices. Is it down to just us, mere designers, or is it to powers that be, those who sit above us? And I think a good thing would be for Tamara to start, since I know she has some views on the subject. Tamara, please.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. Secondly, I will gladly answer this question. So, in my opinion, every one of us is responsible for what is happening around the world. We are not only designers, but also consumers. And in this context, we are responsible for making informed and environmentally responsible decisions. And our choices also show both our colleagues and our sponsors the right way towards more sustainable world. So first of all, when we work in our field, we have to first internalize the values that we want to strive for, And then it all becomes easy, because when you have sustainability in your heart, then it is easy to inspire others, and you don't need any specialized tools to design in a more sustainable and in environmentally responsible way. This is my question. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting answer. And I wonder, what do others think about it? So obviously responsibility scales up and down. And sometimes when you are in a very junior role, maybe there's less opportunities to showcase it. How do you feel about that? Who would like to start?
Can I say something right now?
Of course
Cool.
you can.
This works. Okay. I need to say that I not necessarily agree with you. I mean, obviously, it's very important that we all, as people and human beings, talk about the climate change and all the things that are happening to it. But I'm not a fan of that tendency that we as designers sometimes have, that we are the chosen ones that are chosen to drive that change. But I think that such problems should be discussed on conferences like, I don't know, Davos or Knisa in Poland, where there are people who make the strategic decisions that have impact on the whole businesses, and not necessarily we as designers, which we are the same element of that business puzzle as, I don't know, developers or product owners or every salespeople who are also involved in the process.
But it's working. Yeah, it's working. I agree with both of you. Like, on one hand, I agree with Tamara that we are all making choices, and it's not only about that we are designers here. It's about that as every human being, when we are making any choices and when we are choosing something, especially when we are talking about a younger generation, because I'm the middle one. I'm the millennial, so I'm still quite idealistic. But when we are talking about people who are looking for the values, it's really hard to, fake that we have some values. And when we are not giving the values, it's really easy for younger generation to see that we are not giving the values. And my point here, because I'm talking about the values and we are talking about the change, my point here is that when we are making choices as an even single person, by choosing, for example, a solution that is giving the values, that is helping the climate, we are also changing the direction where the business is going. And this is the part when we can talk about the business, because I agree that as designers, we don't have such a big influence on what we are doing, for example, in the product, but still we have this aspect when we can educate people. Because I'm the person who's not the main positive when we are thinking about that we are all good because we have a lot of bad people here. Not in design wise, I'm sorry. But, like on the earth. But still, like, lots of our choices, and the choices when we are talking about the business is the ignorance or just lack of the knowledge. So if we will just start to talk with these people and explain that, okay, I know that you want to achieve this goal related to the business, but maybe we can achieve this goal with this small challenge that we won't be doing something wrong for the planet, for example. So still, you will have your goal. We will reach this goal, but in different way. And of course, in lots of the situation, there will be like, nah, I don't want to do this because I want to, I don't know, go faster, quicker, anything. But in a lot of the situation, maybe this person will start thinking, because never anyone before asked them about this, for example. So just starting the conversation maybe will not change something in one project, but maybe in another one will be the starting point to really think about a different strategy, for example, for somebody from the business, even if we are only the designers.
Thanks, Agnieszka. That's an interesting point, and this is naturally leading me to Sebastian here, because I think he has some experience in that topic. Sebastian, how do you see it? Because to me, it is a sort of matter of education, not only obviously for future generations to come, but also customers. And how can you ensure that this actually happens and those conversations are being made?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I mean, like, I totally agree to the sort of aspect that, of course, like, we're all consumers, and I think the values we have as like employees, I think, kind of bringing them into the work. And this is like how often these days also people it plays more and more a role, like how people choose the work. There are a lot of like market statistics that specifically, if you look at the younger target group, like one of the key aspects of like how they make the decision about where they work is like also the purpose of the company and like how much they stand up for the environment can really have an impact also on HR and how much you're able to keep talents but also get talents. But also to this point we had before, like on the responsibility topic, I think it's interesting because I think it's easy as designers to, of course, feel like we not have enough power, but at the same time, we, I think, need to understand that we have more power than any other generation of designers before us, right? If you look at just the ability of tools we have, 3D printing, new technologies, most of these tools are for free. We can help people to envision what the business and the product could be. And I think like we should also understand that even though I think like, of course, like we would always like to have more power. Everyone in a company likes to have more power, but at the same time, we have a lot more power than we used to have. Like there's this quote about that the world is more designable than it ever been. If you look around, we're in a privileged position, I think, like as designers. Of course, like if you are more in it's a little bit up to us as well in terms of how you're perceived in a company when it comes to the role of design, right? So I think that's another thing. I think there's the discussion that designers getting a sort of a seat on the table, right? Or like designer getting involved in more strategic discussion. And I think it's also a little bit up to us, right? So like I think like you can change that picture also, depending of course like your role, of course, like, but let's say you're in a startup, you're the only designer, or if you have a let's say a role with a bit more responsibility at a larger company, how can you bring a design to areas or bring in like the creative power that you have in the design team to discussion where design wasn't present yet? Always starts with listening, right? So it's really important, I think, that as designers we kind of really understand what are also the problems maybe the business side is facing, what is the problem the technical side is facing, and then see how we can incorporate sustainability into these discussions and basically find a win-win between like what would be good for the environment and what would be good for the business well. And I think the reality is also that I think you cannot separate these two. I think like as a business, like what is the sort of the vision that you have as a business, and you cannot like take apart ethics and sort of the business vision completely, right? I think that doesn't really work. It's sort of like in the end, both these topics like the ethics and the business, they have to come to one point and like to one vision that aligns these two things, right? So, and I think one of the key problems I think with that businesses have is that they face this challenge of sustainability, and like it's an overwhelming topic, and you suddenly need to deal with the unfamiliar, which is always makes people very nervous, and you have to sort of envision a brand and a business with sort of new values, right? And I think we as designers really come into play there, where we can. It's not about like we kind of like doing completely ourselves, no, but we can support the different stakeholders that have to make the decisions in that context, and the different stakeholders in the company to prototype, to envision, to see like how this could play out to all of our creative outputs that we can contribute. And I think that's a sort of a role we should also see as designers, see how we can bring this in. In one scenario it's easier, one is more difficult. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So all of this, or a lot of this, is to do with seeing the impact, right? And understanding what kind of impact we make. Because obviously, one thing is to develop a service or a product. Another thing is to understand what impact has been made or how environmentally well this is designed. And so the issue that I see in this particular area right now is that we are very good at estimating the impact of something we've done post factum, when it's out there, when it's actually already harming the environment or people, or be it a solution that explores dark patterns, or when it's to do with sustainability, impacts the environment in a bad way. And I wonder, I know some of you have thoughts on this because we discussed it earlier. What strategies basically can we employ, or what can we do in order to understand the negative impact of our actions before we actually take them? Because that's very hard for businesses. Who would like to start on that?
I can start.
Not
with
you,
that.
Paul.
Okay, so I know that my answer won't be the most complex one, but I still have the same opinion. Like, if you want to start with the strategy, first we need to start to talk. Because even if we know that we want to do something, even if we know that we want to have a lot of discussions and we have this vision that we want to be more eco or something, we need to start to talk about this, because right now we have a lot of initiatives about being eco and helping the planet, but most of them are not working because we are not talking about this and we are not saying if we are really delivering something. And especially that, like, I'm sorry to say this, but even if we are designers and we are believing that we are eco, like, we are not always doing this. Like, every year we have the situation when we are looking for a new iPhone, and on the social media everyone is talking about a new iPhone, and even if we are not buying these things, we are still making a one step in the marketing to show other people that there is a new iPhone and someone will be buying this iPhone. So even if we are talking only about that we want to make a change, we need to start with the change with ourselves, about if we are really showing the values and if we are really showing the vision, if we are really behaving like we want to make a change. And then there is the next step. So then there's talking about how we can change the design process and which strategic, I don't know, tactics or tools we can use to do this with the product that we are building. Because it's all about the rules that we want to follow in the design process, in the strategy, but we are not following in our life. So it's a little bit hypocritical from our side.
Can I have a technical
You
interruption?
can, and I was actually going to ask you, so go for it. Maybe.
I mean, I wanted to make a technical request, maybe. Can we do anything with the sound? Because we barely hear each other. Yeah. When Agnieszka was speaking, I almost didn't hear anything what she said, which is very, very sad. So organizers, can we do anything with that?
Więcej stopy w odsłuchu.
Can you hear us well with the people on the...
Yeah, they can.
Okay, so you're in a better
the same problem
situation
we've had
than we
yesterday. So we have to live with it, I'm sorry. You'll hear if you listen very, very carefully. So I'm sorry, I have nothing better to offer, but I'm sure we're going to be fine, don't worry. We are Polish, most of us, we can nail it. We're going to be fine. So Peter, you work a lot with cryptocurrencies and crypto technologies, and obviously in this particular zone, you know, there's a lot of chat about, you know, sustainability in general, because we know that there are energy challenges and whatnot. And so I'm curious to hear, and also from you, Tamara, because you work for a large bank, how do these, you know, minute little actions that some smaller companies take compare to what happens in the larger industry? And also when it comes to predicting our moves and our impact, obviously your two sectors probably are quite ahead, you know, in comparison with some of the little startups or whatnot. So Peter, if you could start and tell us a bit more about how you can, or how do you, or maybe, you know, maybe you have examples of how you can predict that sort of environmental impact with crypto technologies.
I'm not sure if we can, like, very precisely predict what will be the impact, but all the things that are going on in crypto right now are rather going into more eco-friendly way. So, for example, this very week we had an extremely important event in the crypto space, so-called the Merge. So there was a huge change in the Ethereum network that reduced the amount of energy that is required to run the network by more than 99%. So people are aware of that, and we are trying to do that, but I'm not sure if we have enough time to keep it only for the small decisions and the, let's say, from the bottom to the top action. I'm rather on the side that we need regulations to resolve such important problems like climate change and the disaster that we are facing.
Okay, so in other words, what you're saying is that there is a part of responsibility that's on us, but until we implement something wider as the industry, like regulations in the industry itself, it's going to be hard for us to meet those obligations, yeah?
I think that we don't have enough time only to rely on our decisions and on that bottom to top actions. I pretty sure that we need that regulations that will come from entities that are above the countries and that will make sure that big corporations will obey to the rules. If we don't do that, we will probably burn in a few years.
Okay,
Maybe not
that's
years.
very interesting. Tamara, how do you see that?
I agree that the corporations will obey because they will be obliged by the European regulatory to oblige to the rules. And they also have it easy. Why do they have it easy? Because large corporates have access to professional consulting. For example, there is this big entity called SBTI, Science-Based Targets, that allows large corporates to precisely assess their CO2 emissions and comply and set targets and then comply to them. Of course, the smaller companies, the SMEs, micro companies, they do not have access, obviously, to large consulting companies, including SBTI. But fortunately, there are other solutions also for them. And it is good that they are, because some of those smaller companies will also be obliged, but not directly. You're probably aware that there is something called scope 3. That means that we, as a large corporation, we will also have to include our whole value chain in our own calculations. Of course, now is being said that including scope 3 will not be mandatory. However, there are news from the market, and those are reliable ones, that big corporates will still, I wouldn't use a word force, but they would, when talking to the smaller suppliers, they will definitely try to make them comply to some of the reduction targets. So for example, bank is a bad example because in case of a bank, it's more difficult to imagine a supply chain. But let's talk, for example, a big retailer, like, I don't know, Biedronka or Żabka, whatever. And when they talk to their smaller suppliers and they want to improve their own targets, they also, discuss this with their, probably, I don't know that, but they could talk to their smaller counterparts and suggest them some means to reduce their emissions. And for them, SBTI is not the solution, because this is a company that helps the big companies. On SBTI site, you can see the whole list of companies that decided to set SBTI targets. So you can look through them. And for now, I believe there are 3,000 of them, but the group is still growing. On the other hand, if you have smaller players, they also have some tools at their disposal, because many startups started to develop a software that will allow those smaller clients to first assess and then reduce their environmental impact.
We have one of those startup people here, and we're going to give them a voice in a second, I promise, Sebastian. I know you're sitting there. But actually, this is a very good point. So what you're saying is that first some sort of regulatory policy, and then that imposed on the large companies who will then almost require it from the smaller suppliers. I get that. However, what I'm interested in is the actual cost, because, I mean, not cost as like, I'm not asking about the actual cost, but what I'm interested in is affordability for much smaller vendors and producers of software and services. Since I know it's the same situation that happens, let's say, in the accessibility market, that there are low regulations that big players follow, and then they impose those regulations on agencies and whatnot that do not actually have means to implement them internally, and therefore sort of to keep up their game. And I wonder, Sebastian, from your perspective as a person being involved in that sort of market, precisely running a startup or two that are related to that space. If we compare large, big players with those smaller ones, is it the same agility and the same willingness and the same availability of help, in terms of what they can do?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question. I think what you can see is that, of course, like you said, like with big companies, they have more time to investigate. They can build out teams, invest more resources. And of course, like it's a lot of opportunities then, but like, you know, with like the smaller the company, like very often it's a very new field to them. So I think like the level of education is a completely different one. So, and that could be a pitfall for greenwashing as well, because you're not educated enough to kind of to make the right decision in terms of like how you communicate it to the outside as well. So that's, I think, important. So, and of course, like what we also see is like they like specifically very young companies, they face like so many challenges, like, you know, like you need to do so many things, and sustainability even comes on top. It's very tempting to fall into something that is basically just a few clicks, and you're basically more sustainable, right?
Hey, I'm green.
And so I think it's important that so one is really like the education aspect. So, you know, how can we sort of educate startups or younger companies in that context? How can we make it accessible? I think that's sort of a main problem. I think the topic overall is highly overwhelming. Even bigger companies are really struggling with that. And sometimes you also, because very often like the people then getting in charge of an SMEs on sustainability are not necessarily sustainability managers. Sometimes they are team managers or have some kind of other roles, and then they basically also take the responsibility of looking to sustainability in a company. So they like the education is not at the level of like a ESG manager with or sustainability manager with like 15 years of experience. Yeah, so so I think like the level of education is very different. And then I think like one of the like I think like it always boils down to we should not confuse short-term expenses with long-term gains. Yeah. So there are a lot of like long-term gains to really do it the right way, and oftentimes they can save you like they're going to save you a lot of time, a lot of cost in the long run or even the mid run. Yeah. If you think about like how long can you keep the talents and the workforce that you have been onboarding in your company, sort of your energy bill, right? So there is a lot of overlap between like the business advantages. We're not like not even talking about the whole consumer side when it comes to business and sustainability. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to jump into something different now, a slightly differently focused aspect, because we are talking about companies, we're talking about responsibility of you know, large and small organizations and policies surrounding that and whatnot. But we also know that a lot of it is to do with our own practice. And we are all designers here. Most of us here in the audience would be designers too. And I don't know what it's like with you folks, but I know that certainly talking about sustainability or anything green other than green beans that I had for lunch wasn't really in my university education or any other education for that matter. And I know that many of you know, upcoming designers, people who are only starting their careers, you know, it's almost the same in their education chain. Like we're not really talking about it. We only just started talking about design ethics at some of the, you know, universities or boot camps, not to mention sustainability and, you know, the climate change and whatnot, even though we are all directly affected. And what I'm interested in, and of course, it wasn't in the questions that we prepared, so let's have some, you know, brain gymnastics here. In terms of working with younger personnel that comes to you, you know, people that you employ, what is it like? Do you feel that there's something changing and those topics are becoming more important to them and they're seeking that information? Or are we still at the level where we just want to produce stuff quickly, success in our career, you know, produce things, make things without giving much attention to those details, and all that push has to come from you? What is it like?
I feel like it's about the position in which the position this person is, because when we are talking, like from my experience, when I'm talking not only about people I'm working with, I'm talking also about the students that I'm working with, about people I'm mentoring right now. I have in my mentoring program. I'm so happy to work with younger generation, because I see that even if they don't have the experience, they have this value in their heart that they want to live on the planet that will be healthy for them, not the planet that we are thinking that we need to grow all the time. But when they are starting the first job, it's really easy to, you know, lose yourself, because even if you have the value in your heart, it's really easy to lose yourself, because you are seeing other people who are just working on something. You want to be the same as them because you want to just grow as a designer. And there is this moment when you have the first maybe 1 or 2 years when you're just working and observing other people, and then you are developing yourself as a designer. And I feel like this is our role as a people who have more experience to show them that you can be more eco, I will say this way, from the beginning. You don't need to observe other people who are not thinking about our planet. You can think about the planet from the first time and make the choices related to your values, that you want to do something good for the society, for the planet, for everything we have here, not only just to make something to have the experience and then decide, okay, I will have my own voice, for example, after 2 or 3 years.
Okay, that's interesting. Tamara and Peter, you work again for two very different organizations and you recruit actively all the time. What is it like? Do you have the same observation, or would you, is there something different about what you feel and see every day?
Okay, from my experience, it's case by case. There are many people who have, sustainability in their DNA. There are also people who are more, I would say, social media oriented. But some of them also value the environment, and because they are social media oriented, they learn a lot from social media. And young people now are, I would say, quite aware. For example, Extinction Rebellion Youth is very active in Poland. They connect via social media. They organize all types of environmental actions. I would say it depends. There are many people who are very much aware.
To zależy.
There are others that are, I would say, less aware. I'm not a fan of making generalizations, and I don't have access to any data that would say definitely that this new generation is more eco-friendly than mine. I'm a millennial, so we are also considered quite, sustainability aware. But from, I would say, this is not any type of evidence, because it's only, accidental evidence. I don't know if it's called that in English, but people tend to be more environment focused, but it could also be a matter of my Warsaw bubble. So I don't know.
This is what I wanted to say. I'm not so positive as Agnieszka, definitely. I think that it depends a lot on the bubble that you live in. And I also see in my bubble more interest in that, but as a whole community, I don't think that we are enough talking about it and that we are enough educated on it. I don't see such a change as Agnieszka mentioned.
No, I'm only talking about younger generation and people.
Yeah,
who are
I know.
But I agree, like 100%, that we need to talk more when we are when we are talking with other people. We as experienced designers, people who are working in the field, and we are not avoiding, and we are not scared. It's not scary for us to say what we are thinking. Like, it's our role to tell younger generation and younger people that you can, I don't know, like, you also can decide from the beginning. So I think, like, this is the problem here, that when you are just entering the market, you feel that you don't have the voice because you don't have the experience. And younger generation, I know I'm in the bubble, but I'm seeing, like, they are just thinking about the planet more than people I know from for example, from my age. And I really try to be positive because this is our hope, like, being honest.
You said that it's your role, and I'm curious, you're thinking about you as a human being or you as a designer?
Me as a person who is in position when I can say something loud and nobody will say to me, like, nah, you're working in this field, like, I don't know, for a few months, so you need to listen more experienced people. Because when you have the experience in every industry, it's not only about the design, it's normal that there will be people who will be telling you that, okay, like, you have only 1 year, you don't know nothing. I have, I don't know, 10, 15 years of experience. So if you have some position in the industry, it's easier to tell to other people that it's okay, for example, that you will be going with your values here when you are, I don't know, making the decision or you are talking with the client. You don't need to be silent with your feelings when you are talking about the planet and about the change, even if you are younger. But it will be really helpful for me when I was younger if there will be a person who said to me that I also have a voice. I don't need to wait like 2 or 3 years to make a change only because I'm the junior here, for example.
This is a lot to do with the kind of, how our society perceives education and, status, not only social status, but work status and whatnot. So this is interesting because to you, Sebastian, those might be subjects that you see slightly differently since the education system in Germany is very different. And I'm not saying better or worse, just different. But here is what I wanted to touch on. So we often, in our education, our UX education, we follow some methods. And one of those methods, for instance, might be design thinking. The other might be like, I don't know, design sprints. Third might be blah, you name it. There's so many of them. And again, at heart, majority of them don't really take any sustainability or, impact measurement into consideration. We just are made, we are put into them, we are using them just to produce, just to make things grow, yeah? So this is an interesting one because, for instance, from the perspective of growth, Tamara, as a growth hacker person who has seen, companies growing exponentially, just basically, bit by bit, very fast, how much of this actual effort is really there and how much of this chat about sustainability is just what we've described as our bubble? How much of it actually happens?
Okay, I was waiting for this question since I, contributed my bio. Okay, so growth hacking, this is, a method that allows you to sell in a more efficient way using data, using behavioral science, etc. Today there was a great presentation about growth design that basically combines service design and growth hacking, delivered by Wojtek from Brainly. It was amazing. But getting back to the question. So first of all, let's talk about degrowth hacking with DE in the beginning, so degrowth hacking. So what would you say about using growth hacking tools for improving environmental awareness instead of selling products? What would you say for using growth hacking tools for scaling sustainable businesses instead of those that are not sustainable? Today, I noticed that Piotr is also a nerd like me. So I will use quite a nerdy comparison.
I think we are all nerds, aren't we? We're a bit nerdy.
Yeah, so in my opinion, using growth hacking tools to promote sustainability is somewhat like white necromancy, so using dark arts in the service of the greater good. And all MarTech, all web analytics tools that are there can be used to serve a better purpose. So growth hacking itself is a tool like any other, and you could use it either to promote more production, more pollution, etc., or to promote knowledge and growth of scalable businesses. Also businesses like the one that Sebastian represents. So namely those that allow you to measure, and after you measure, you can, make improvements. So growth hacking itself is good. Growth, as we know it, is probably something that will need to go.
Didn't quite work for us, right?
Yes, we know that, but it's also controversial when we talk about third world countries because
of course, yeah,
banning them, their ability to grow and to catch up and to, the convergence mechanism is also something very difficult. We have to remember that in ESG, there is also an S that means social, right? So there are people in other parts of the world that are not as lucky as we are.
Thank you. So we're coming to an end, but not yet. Don't worry. The final question from me before we close would be, what is really stopping us then from making this all work, from becoming more sustainable, from becoming smarter about our choices at work, our methods, all of that? Sebastian, what would you say?
Yeah, I think like if I have to name it in one word, I think it's knowledge. I think, and it's the education aspect. I think the as designers, also specifically, I think to the point earlier is that it's not very accessible yet. I think so much, like as you said, it's not part of the design education, right? If I'm studying design or something, maybe there's some aspects mentioned about that, but it hasn't been really like picked up. And I think very often the education system comes a little bit later than what the current state of the where the market need is, right? And so I think I hope in a few years is going to be as normal as checking accessibility on your product, right? I mean, like, if you look at that was also in your topics, like if you think about like accessibility of your product, maybe you're looking like 10 years ago, this was also a fairly new topic that's been picking up. Now every designer knows how to kind of check for that and what's to consider. And like the best practices when it comes to that. And I think the same hopefully is going to be there for sustainability more on the product design side. And I think even on the more strategic design side, you have been mentioning design thinking, for example. I think there are a lot of companies have been developed methods that are basically design thinking 2.0, which basically incorporate the planet more, right? And circular design methods, etc. So I think also there, I think slowly these methods have to be replaced or sort of evolve into these new methods and tools, and hopefully it's going to be just normally for people to be educated on that instead of the past knowledge. Yeah.
Awesome. Would any of you like to add anything to what Sebastian just said?
I was hoping that you will also say ego, not only the knowledge.
I mean, like ego.
Ego, yeah, like ego as a people, because I feel like the knowledge is the one part when we are talking about the education of all of the designers and people who are just making the change, because not only designers are making the change when we are talking about the industry and the whole climate, but there's also an ego, and we need to remember that even if everyone will know what we should do and what will be the result, we are not all good people, and we need also to find a way how to convince others that maybe doing a good choices for the planet will be good for, I don't know, their goals, even if they are looking for, I don't know, only growing the business and they are not caring about the planet, but for example, going more better way with the development for the planet will be also better for them, for their goals.
For personal choices.
Yes.
Peter, anything to add for the end?
Education from bottom to up, but regulation from up to bottom.
Beautiful summary. Okay, so I think it's time for questions. If you folk have any questions, it's the time to ask them. There could be something from Slido as well. I see one hand up there, although I cannot see much because of the lights.
So can you imagine, because you said, I think, that growth will have to go. So can you imagine the world without the constant growth, that one day we won't serve only?
I can't.
So you can't?
Can't. I cannot see, to be honest. So I think that we should be looking for a way to grow in a sustainable way rather than degrowing anything.
That's well, a bold statement. How about you folks? Tamara, I can see you.
I said that growth as we know it has to go. So basically, I also believe in sustainable development, and I also hope that our industries will move towards more sustainable way. Actually, they have to if we are to avoid the climate crisis, but I don't think crisis is a strong enough word at this stage. So the world has to grow. As I said, there are also countries that need to grow in order to achieve a level that is comparable to ours. So definitely growth has to happen, but it has to be different than it used to be. It cannot be the growth for growth's sake. It has to be mindful. It has to be sustainable. It has to be responsible.
And I only want to add one thing, that I think that we are losing here one point, that it all depends from the definition of the growth we have. Because on one hand, the growth can be that we are selling more, and of course it will be, I don't know, better for the planet, in better way for the planet, but still it will be this kind of the growth. But maybe we should change this definition and find another way of growing without, I don't know, adding any product or selling more. Maybe there will be a different growth in the future. But yes, I agree with both of you that we are not able to just degrow and not growing with all what we are having, but maybe the grow and the way how we define the grow will change.
We need to grow the living standard of people and their, life satisfaction, not GDP. So.
Yes, that's something that is probably a subject for another very wide debate, like why the hell are we still measuring something like GDP? This is bonkers.
Exactly.
But before we go with the next question, Sebastian, would you like to add anything to that? You can say no, that's fine.
I think we heard a lot of different opinions, and I think I can see truth in all of them, I think.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else with a question? It's your chance, folks. Right, I'm literally blind when I'm looking there, but maybe there is someone there. Any hands up? Cool, okay. So, first of all, obviously you can still ask questions to our wonderful panelists just by connecting with them on LinkedIn, Twitter, and whatnot, and you should do that, because this is what conferences are for. I'm sorry, I'm just kicking into my usual old shoes. I would like to close the panel with a nice quote from Audre Lorde, who said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house," which essentially means that we cannot really do this unless we start thinking differently, start thinking about the growth, start thinking about our daily practice, start influencing each other and helping one another. And with that in mind, I would like you all to thank you, Peter, Agnieszka, Sebastian, and Tamara, for this wonderful time. I am Wojtek Kutyla. See you on another planet shortly.